Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere so cold that your eyelashes freeze together when you blink, where exposed skin develops frostbite in under 2 minutes, and where the act of breathing outdoors feels like inhaling broken glass. We're traveling to Yakutia, officially the Sakha Republic, in northeastern Siberia, where winter temperatures routinely plunge to minus 71 degrees Celsius. That's minus 96 degrees Fahrenheit for my American friends. And you're not just visiting as a tourist with a warm hotel room waiting. No, you're a livestock herder here, which means you'll be outside in this frozen nightmare every single day, caring for animals that somehow, improbably, survive in conditions that would kill most living things within hours. You probably won't survive this, by the way. Statistically speaking, outsiders who attempt traditional Yakut herding without years of acclimatization tend to last about 3 days before hypothermia or frostbite sends them to the nearest hospital, assuming they can reach one before their snowmobiles fuel gels into useless sludge. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm always curious whether you're winding down at midnight or sneaking this in during a lunch break on the other side of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's 4:47 a.m. on a January morning, and you're lying in a wooden house that creaks and pops like a sailing ship as the timber contracts in the cold. Your breath forms clouds even here, inside, despite the fire that's been burning all night in the traditional clay stove, the camelliak, at the center of your home. The thermometer mounted outside your double-paned window reads minus 68 degrees Celsius. Not the coldest you've seen. That honor belongs to a morning 3 winters ago when it hit minus 71.2 degrees Celsius, but cold enough that the world outside has transformed into something alien and hostile. You can hear the cold, actually. It makes sounds. A constant, faint crackling as moisture in the air freezes instantly, and occasional rifle shot cracks when trees in the surrounding taiga split open, their sap expanded into ice that ruptures the wood from within. You don't want to get up. Every cell in your body is screaming at you to stay under this pile of reindeer hides and wool blankets. But your horses and reindeer don't care about your comfort. They're out there in their enclosures, and they need you. Livestock farming in Yakutia isn't a bucolic pastoral dream. It's a battle against thermodynamics itself, a daily negotiation with the second law that entropy always wins, that heat flows from warm to cold. And in this place, you and your animals are tiny islands of warmth in an ocean of cold that wants nothing more than to equalize everything into frozen stillness. You swing your legs out of bed, and your feet touch the floor, wooden planks that feel like concrete despite the wool socks you slept in. The first rule of dressing for minus 68 degrees Celsius. Never expose skin. You pull on your base layer, a modern synthetic material that wicks moisture, because sweat, even the tiniest amount, will freeze against your skin and conduct heat away from your body 30 times faster than dry fabric. Over that, a layer of wool, then another, then a reindeer hide coat. Not the kind of artisanal fashion piece you'd see in a Moscow boutique, but a genuine working garment, thick and heavy, with the fur turned inward against your body. The outer hide is so stiff in this cold that it barely bends. Your hands are next. Mittens, not gloves. Gloves separate your fingers and make each one vulnerable. You wear thin liner gloves first, then massive mittens made from dog fur, which, historians note, Yakut herders have preferred for centuries because dog fur doesn't accumulate frost the way reindeer or sheepwool does. Your head gets wrapped in a wool scarf, then covered with a fur hat, the ashanka, with ear flaps that tie under your chin. Finally, you pull on a face mask that covers everything except your eyes, though you know from experience that even this won't fully protect you. The moisture from your breath will freeze on the mask's fabric, creating a stiff plate of ice within minutes. Historians still argue whether the indigenous Sakha people, who've lived in Yakutia for over 1,000 years, originally developed these clothing techniques independently or adapted them from earlier nomadic cultures who moved through the region. What's not debated is that they perfected them. Modern Arctic research stations use equipment based on principles the Sakha figured out centuries ago. Multiple layers, dead air space for insulation, and absolute moisture control. You step outside, and the cold hits you like a physical force. It's not just the temperature, It's the speed at which heat evacuates from anything warm. The air is so cold that it's denser than normal, and when you breathe, you have to do it carefully, slowly, through your nose, letting the labyrinth of nasal passages warm the air before it reaches your lungs. Breathing deeply through your mouth would freeze the moisture in your throat and bronchial tubes. People have collapsed with ice-clogged airways doing exactly that. The darkness is total. At this latitude, just a few degrees south of the Arctic Circle, January brings only about 3 hours of murky twilight around midday. Right now, at 5 a.m., the stars are out, crystalline and unblinking in the dry air. So many of them that the Milky Way casts actual shadows on the snow. The snow itself is unlike anything in warmer climates. At these temperatures, it doesn't pack or clump. It's a fine, granular powder that squeaks under your boots. A distinctive sound caused by the fracturing of ice crystals that are too cold to melt even slightly under pressure. Your breath plumes out in great clouds that hang in the air behind you, each exhale creating a small fog bank that freezes into ice crystals, what Arctic researchers call breath diamonds, that tinkle as they fall to the ground. It's beautiful, sure, but it's also dangerous. That moisture is coming from your body, and you need to keep it. Dehydration is a serious risk here. The air is so dry that every breath pulls moisture from your lungs, and you can become dangerously dehydrated without ever feeling thirsty. The barn, really more of a fortress against the cold, sits about 40 meters from your house. It's a squat structure made from thick logs, gaps between them stuffed with moss and clay that's frozen harder than concrete. Your grandfather built this barn, and his grandfather helped build the one before it that burned down. Fire is an ever-present risk when you're running with stoves constantly. There's a single door, oriented to face south and slightly downhill, which minimizes the wind's ability to blow directly into it. Above the door, mounted on the wall, is a thermometer. This one reads -69 degrees Celsius. The air has gotten colder in the 10 minutes since you checked inside. Before you open the barn door, you pause to listen. You can hear them in there. The shuffling of hooves, the occasional snort of a horse, a reindeer's grunt. They're alive. Every morning, this moment of listening is a small prayer answered. Your family keeps 12 horses. Yakut horses? A breed so adapted to this environment that they're essentially a different species from the sleek animals you'd see at a Kentucky racetrack, and about 30 reindeer. The horses are your prestige animals, your wealth. The reindeer are more numerous, easier to manage in some ways, but also more vulnerable to predators. You pull open the door, it takes real effort as ice is formed around the edges, and slip inside, closing it quickly behind you. The temperature inside the barn is still well below freezing, probably around -35 degrees Celsius, but compared to outside, it feels almost tropical. Your animals have done this. Their bodies, their breath, their collective metabolism has warmed the space by more than 30 degrees. You can smell them. A thick, organic smell of hay and dung and animal bodies. It's not unpleasant. It's the smell of life persisting. A quirky tidbit that most outsiders don't know. Yakut horses grow winter coats so thick, up to 12 centimeters long, that snow can pile on their backs without melting. They're living insulation demonstrations, and they've evolved, or been selectively bred. The archaeological record isn't entirely clear. To have metabolisms that generate more heat per kilogram of body weight than horses from temperate climates. In winter, they actually prefer to be outside rather than in the barn, grazing through the snow to reach the frozen grass beneath. But at -68 degrees Celsius, even they need shelter from the wind. You move among them in the darkness, you haven't lit the kerosene lamp yet, and you won't until you need to do close work, letting your eyes adjust. You count shapes. All 12 horses are standing, which is good. A downed horse in this cold can freeze to the ground in under an hour, their body heat melting a thin layer of ice that refreezes around them like cement. You count the reindeer next, moving your lips silently. 28, 29, 30, all present. Now comes the first major task of the day, water. Animals need water even in winter, even here. But there's a problem. At -68 degrees Celsius, water cannot exist as a liquid in any container you possess. It freezes almost instantly, expanding as it does, shattering any vessel not specifically designed to accommodate it. So you don't keep liquid water in the barn. Instead, stacked against the far wall, you have blocks of ice, cut from the nearby river during the early winter and hauled here by sled. Each block weighs about 30 kilograms. You light the lamp now, a small kerosene burner that casts dancing shadows on the log walls. The animals watch you with the patient, stoic expression that Yakut horses are famous for. They know the routine. You grab the metal hook, carefully even though you're wearing mittens because touching bare metal at this temperature would freeze your skin to it instantly, and drag one of the ice blocks toward the center of the barn where you've set up the melting station. This is where it gets medieval. You have a large metal basin, actually an old Soviet-era industrial sink that someone repurposed decades ago, sitting atop a brick structure with a fire chamber below it. You'll build a fire, slowly, carefully, feeding it with dried dung, which burns hot and slow, and precious firewood. The ice will melt and you'll have water. This process will take about 90 minutes, and you'll need to produce roughly 80 liters to meet your animal's daily needs. While you work, building the fire with hands that are already starting to ache from the cold despite the layers, you think about why anyone does this. Why your family has done this for generations. The answer isn't simple romance or tradition, though those play a part. It's economics, identity, and a kind of stubborn human insistence on inhabiting every possible niche on this planet. Your horses and reindeer represent wealth, yes, but also food security, transportation, and cultural continuity. The Saka people have been horse breeders since before written records in this region, and that identity runs deeper than mere occupation. It's who you are. The fire catches, and you sit back on your heels watching the flames. The ice block is already starting to show a sheen of wet on its surface nearest the heat. You'll stay here, feeding the fire, monitoring the melt, while the darkness outside slowly, eventually, grudgingly begins to lighten into the brief twilight that passes for day in a Yakutian January. Your animals shift and breathe around you. 30-degree warmth doesn't sound like much, but it's the difference between survivable and fatal. In a few hours, when the sun's weak light finally appears, you'll let the horses out to dig for grass. The reindeer might stay in or venture out, depending on their mood and the wind. But for now, you're all here together, warm-blooded creatures huddled in a wooden box, defying mathematics and physics and common sense. Welcome to livestock farming at the edge of what's possible. This is your life. This is day one of winter, except winter here lasts 7 months. The fire in the melting basin crackles and pops, and you feed it another dry dung patty. Compressed blocks that your family makes each autumn when the animals are still producing waste faster than the cold can freeze it. The ice block is sweating now, rivulets running down its sides into the metal basin, and you've got maybe another hour before you'll have enough liquid water for the morning drinking session. While you wait, you turn your attention to the barn itself, because this structure is the only reason you and your animals survive, and it requires constant maintenance. Let's talk about what makes a Yakutian livestock barn different from, say, a barn in Wisconsin or Bavaria. First, the walls. Your barn's walls are nearly half a meter thick, not because your ancestors were overbuilders, but because thermal mass is everything when outside temperatures can kill in minutes. The logs are Siberian larch, a tree that grows so slowly in this climate that its wood is dense, resinous, and nearly impervious to rot. Between each log, packed into every gap and crevice, is a mixture of moss, clay, and dried grass that was applied wet during construction and has since frozen into a substance harder than most modern concrete. Historians have documented Saka barns that are over 200 years old. Their chinking still intact, still functional. But here's where it gets interesting. The barn isn't actually designed to be warm. That would be impossible without a massive, constant heat source that would bankrupt you in fuel costs. Instead, it's designed to be less catastrophically cold than outside. The goal is to create a space where your animal's own body heat can accumulate enough to prevent them from freezing to death, but not so warm that they start to sweat, because sweat, remember, is death. Moisture in fur or hair ruins its insulating properties. You stand and move to the eastern wall, where you noticed yesterday that frost was accumulating thicker than usual. You run your gloved hand along the logs, feeling for drafts. There, a subtle whisper of air, so cold it's like a knife even through your mittens. You've found a gap where the chinking has contracted away from the wood. This happens constantly, The logs themselves shrink in the extreme cold, and the chinking, despite being frozen solid, still experiences microscopic contractions. The result is gaps, and gaps mean heat loss, and heat loss means dead animals. From a shelf near the door, you grab a bucket of prepared chinking, a modern version made from clay, sand, and shredded plant fiber mixed with water that's been kept near the fire so it's still pliable. You work it into the gap with a wooden spatula, pressing hard, forcing it into every void. It'll freeze solid within minutes of you finishing, becoming part of the wall's continuous thermal barrier. Your grandfather taught you this, and his grandfather taught him. Historians still argue whether the specific ratio of clay to sand to fiber was developed through systematic experimentation or accumulated trial and error over centuries. But either way, it works. The recipe you're using is essentially unchanged from accounts written by Russian explorers in the 1700s who documented Saka building techniques. The roof is another engineering marvel, though you mostly take it for granted until something goes wrong. It's not flat roofs in Yakutia would collapse under the weight of snow and ice that accumulates over 7-month winters. Instead, it's steeply pitched, almost like a Gothic church, allowing snow to slide off while retaining a thick insulating layer of it along the edges. The roof structure is a log frame covered with birch bark, waterproof, flexible, resistant to rot, then a layer of sod, then more birch bark, then finally wooden shingles. The result is about 40 centimeters of layered insulation above your animals' heads. But here's the quirky part most people don't know. The roof has deliberate ventilation holes. Yes, holes. In a structure designed to retain heat, you've intentionally created places where warm air can escape. Why? Because your animals breathe, and breath contains moisture, and moisture in a closed system at these temperatures creates a deadly phenomenon: interior ice accumulation. Without ventilation, the moisture from 12 horses and 30 reindeer breathing all night would condense on the ceiling and walls as frost, growing thicker each day, until eventually the entire interior would be coated in centimeters of ice. That ice would actually make the barn colder by increasing the interior surface area exposed to the cold exterior, and it would add structural weight that could collapse the roof. So you have vents, not large ones, just gaps between specific roof sections covered with angled wooden slats that prevent snow from blowing in while allowing moisture-laden air to escape. It's a delicate balance. Too much ventilation and you lose precious heat. Too little and you create an ice palace that kills as surely as the cold outside. You check the vents now, climbing a ladder to peer at the ones on the interior ceiling. They're clear, which is good. Last week, one had become blocked with frost, and you'd had to climb up onto the roof in minus 63 degrees Celsius whether to clear it from the outside. An experience you'd prefer never to repeat. Being on a roof in that cold, where the wind can reach you, where a fall could mean landing in a snowdrift and being unable to get up before hypothermia sets in, is the kind of thing that makes you reconsider your life choices. The floor of the barn is another critical element, and it's not what you'd expect. There's no concrete slab here, no wooden planks. Instead, the floor is packed earth. Dirt that's been compressed by years of hooves and is now frozen to the consistency of granite. But here's the clever part. Beneath that frozen earth is a layer of dry sand, and beneath that, more earth. The sand layer acts as drainage for any moisture that might accumulate, from urine, spilled water, whatever, during the brief warm months, preventing it from creating muddy conditions or seeping into the foundation. In winter, it's all frozen solid, of course, but the principle matters for the structure's longevity. On top of the frozen earth floor, you maintain a layer of hay and straw, about 15 centimeters deep. This bedding serves multiple purposes. It insulates the animal's hooves and bodies from the frozen ground, it absorbs some moisture, and it provides a slightly softer surface than ice-hard dirt. You replace it weekly, hauling out the soiled bedding, which is frozen into a solid mat that you have to break apart with an axe, and bringing in fresh material from your hay barn, a separate structure where you store the summer's harvest. Speaking of hay, let's talk about how much your animals eat in winter. A single Yakut horse requires about 10 kilograms of hay per day to maintain its body weight and metabolic heat production during the coldest months. 12 horses means 120 kilograms per day, or about 3,600 kilograms per month. For a 7-month winter, you're looking at over 25,000 kilograms of hay, and that's just for the horses. The reindeer need another 15,000 kilograms. Where does it all go? You've got 3 separate hay barns, each one stacked floor to ceiling with compressed bales that you and your family spent the entire brief summer cutting, drying, baling, and storing. The water has melted now. You can hear it sloshing gently in the basin as the fire beneath continues to heat it. You approach with a wooden bucket, never metal, which would conduct cold from your hands and freeze to your skin if you touched it without gloves, and start distributing water to the animals. The horses drink first, plunging their muzzles into the bucket, and you watch carefully to make sure none of them are drinking too fast or showing signs of colic. In this cold, digestive issues can escalate to fatal conditions faster than you can call a veterinarian, assuming you could even get a veterinarian here, which you can't. The nearest one is in Yakutsk, about 200 kilometers away over frozen roads that are only passable by heavy vehicles. Each horse drinks about 25 liters. You do the math. 12 horses, 300 liters total. The reindeer are lighter, only need about 6 liters each, but there are 30 of them, another 180 liters. You're going to be melting ice and hauling water for the next 3 hours. This is why you started at 4:47 a.m. By the time you finish, it'll be mid-morning, and you'll have barely scratched the surface of the day's work. While the animals drink, you inspect the barn's fire safety equipment, because as critical as warmth is, fire is the ultimate terror in a Yakutian winter. Your barn contains tons of dry hay, wooden walls soaked in resinous sap, and an open flame you're using right now to melt water. A barn fire in minus 68 degrees Celsius is a death sentence for your animals and potentially for you. They can't escape fast enough, and even if they did, they'd freeze outside before you could round them up. So you maintain almost paranoid fire discipline. The melting basin sits on brick, surrounded by a cleared area of packed earth, with no combustible material within 2 meters. You have metal buckets of sand stationed at 3 points around the barn. Sand, not water, because water would freeze solid and be useless. In summer, you coat the interior walls with a clay-based fireproofing mixture. And you never, ever leave a fire unattended, even for a minute. A quirky historical note. Before the Soviet period, Saka herders used a completely different barn design that involved sunken floors, essentially digging down 1 meter or 2 into the permafrost and building the barn partially underground. The earth itself provided insulation. Some old-timers still swear these were superior, but the Soviets introduced above-ground designs based on Russian architectural principles, and those are what most people use now. There's still debate in academic circles about whether traditional sunken barns were actually more thermally efficient or whether they just seemed that way because they were smaller and housed fewer animals. You're hauling the 5th bucket of water to the reindeer section when you notice one of the young reindeer. A female, maybe 18 months old, is standing oddly, favoring her left rear leg. You set down the bucket and approach slowly, speaking soft sounds. The Saka language has specific vocalizations for calming reindeer, rhythmic syllables that don't translate into Russian or English, but that the animals have been conditioned to associate with safety. She lets you approach, and you run your hands down her leg, feeling for heat, swelling, anything unusual. There, her hoof. You lift it carefully, and even in the lamplight you can see the problem. A chunk of ice has gotten wedged between the 2 cloves of her cloven hoof and frozen there. It's forcing the hoof apart slightly, causing pain and potential damage to the connective tissue. This is a common problem in extreme cold, and if left untreated, it can lead to lameness or infection. You pull out your hoof pick, a metal tool that you've kept tucked inside your coat next to your body so it's not freezing cold, and gently work the ice out. The reindeer flinches but doesn't pull away. When you set her hoof down, she immediately puts weight on it normally. Crisis averted. Small problems become big problems fast out here. That ice wedge, ignored for even a day, could have resulted in an infection that would kill a valuable animal or force you to slaughter it prematurely. Your entire existence revolves around catching these small problems, these tiny deviations from normal, before they cascade into disasters. The morning light, such as it is, has begun to leak into the barn through the small windows near the roof line. These windows are triple-layered glass, then an air gap, then another pane of glass, then another air gap, then a final pane. Even so, frost coats the interior pane in elaborate fern-like patterns. The weak sunlight that filters through is pale and watery, barely enough to cast shadows, but it's something. The animals stir more actively now, sensing that the day has officially begun. You've been in the barn for over 3 hours, and you've accomplished the morning watering and a basic health check. The fire in the melting basin has died down to coals, which you'll bank and cover with ash. You'll need it again this evening for the night watering. Your back aches from bending over buckets, your hands are sore despite the gloves, and you're thirsty yourself, though you've been too busy to drink. Before you leave the barn to return to your house for breakfast, you perform one final inspection of the structure itself. You check the door hinges, thick metal pieces that must remain functional despite contracting in the cold. You check the interior support beams for any new cracks, which can split catastrophically in these temperatures. You check the corners where walls meet, looking for new gaps. Everything looks solid. This barn, this fortress, this thermal refuge will hold for another day. Outside, the temperature has risen to minus 65 degrees Celsius. It's practically balmy. You step back outside into the minus 65 degrees Celsius morning, and the cold slaps you awake all over again. It doesn't matter that you've already been out here once today, your body doesn't acclimate, it just endures. The sky has lightened to a deep twilight blue, the kind of color you'd see in warmer climates about 20 minutes after sunset. Except here it's 8:30 in the morning, and this is as bright as it's going to get for the next few hours. You can see the outline of the taiga forest that surrounds your property, skeletal larch trees standing like dark sentinels against the snow. Your house is calling to you warmth, tea, food, a chance to sit down. But there's no time for that yet, because you've taken care of watering the animals in the barn, but you haven't addressed the water situation for your household, and that's an entirely separate challenge. In Yakutia, at these temperatures, water infrastructure, as most of the world knows it, simply doesn't exist. There are no pipes running into your house because any pipe, no matter how well insulated, would freeze solid within hours. The water inside would expand, burst the pipe, and you'd be left with an expensive piece of broken metal and no water at all. So where does your household water come from? The same place your animal's water comes from: ice. Specifically, ice cut from the Lena River or one of its tributaries during early winter, before the ice gets too thick to cut efficiently and before the coldest temperatures make working outside even more dangerous than it already is. You and your neighbors, there are 4 other families within a 10-kilometer radius, which counts as practically suburban density out here, have a communal ice-cutting operation each November, a tradition that goes back centuries. The ice blocks are stacked in a dedicated structure next to your house, a simple log shed with no heating. Each block is roughly 1 meter long, half a meter wide, and 40 centimeters thick. You hauled 30 of them here in November, dragging them behind your snowmobile on a wooden sled, and you've already used 7. At your current rate of consumption, about 150 liters per day for cooking, drinking, washing, and other household needs, you'll go through roughly 1 block every 3 days. Do the math. 30 blocks should last about 90 days, which gets you through the worst of winter, but just barely. If you miscalculated, if your family uses more water than anticipated, you'll be making an emergency ice-cutting trip in February when temperatures might be even worse than they are now. You walk to the ice shed, each step producing that distinctive squeak of ultra-cold snow. The sound is actually caused by the fracturing of ice crystals under pressure, a phenomenon that only occurs below about minus 15 degrees Celsius. The colder it gets, the higher pitched the squeak. Right now, it's almost a chirp. You pull open the shed door, more ice to chip away from the edges first, and survey your remaining blocks. 23. You're ahead of schedule, which is good. You select a block and begin the process of moving it. At these temperatures, ice is harder than most wood, and the block weighs close to 40 kilograms. You have a specialized tool for this, a metal dolly with sled runners instead of wheels, because wheels don't work when it's this cold. The metal has been kept inside the shed, so it's only about minus 40 degrees Celsius instead of the ambient minus 65 degrees Celsius outside. You still handle it with thick gloves, positioning it carefully before levering the ice block onto it with a long wooden pole. The journey from the ice shed to your house is maybe 15 meters, but dragging 40 kilograms of ice on a sled over squeaky snow while bundled in enough layers to make you move like a deep-sea diver is genuinely exhausting. You're breathing hard by the time you get the block through your front door, a double-door airlock system, outer door, small enclosed space, inner door, to minimize heat loss, and you can feel sweat starting to form on your back. This is dangerous. Sweat in these conditions is your enemy. Inside, the house is warm, relatively speaking. The thermometer on the wall reads -2 degrees Celsius, which means the chameleon stove in the center of the room has been burning through the night and is still radiating heat. Your wife, Sarjalana, is up, tending to it, adding split logs from the pile stacked against the interior wall. She glances at you as you maneuver the ice block toward the melting area, and you can see the question in her eyes. How are the animals? You nod. All good. She nods back. This is the extent of your morning conversation. There will be time for words later, after the essential work is done. The household ice melting system is more sophisticated than the barn setup because you need cleaner water for human consumption. The ice block goes into a large metal trough, an actual antique piece that's been in your family for 4 generations, back when Saka metalworkers were hammering out these vessels by hand. The trough sits on a platform next to the stove, positioned to receive radiant heat without being so close that it would melt too quickly and overflow. Here's the quirky detail that most outsiders find fascinating. You don't melt the ice directly with fire. That would work, sure, but it would also scorch the bottom of the trough and give the water a metallic taste. Instead, you melt it with radiant heat from the stove and with hot rocks. Sarjalana has been heating fist-sized river stones in the stove's hottest section, and now she uses metal tongs to transfer them, one by one, into the trough with the ice. The stones hiss and crack as they hit the ice, and steam rises in spectacular plumes. The ice melts from the inside out, creating a pool of water around each stone. This method has multiple advantages. It's faster than radiant heat alone, it doesn't require keeping a fire burning directly under the trough, and the stones can be reused indefinitely. Historians have documented this exact technique in Saka households going back at least 300 years, and archaeologists have found evidence that suggests it might be even older. Some scholars argue it was borrowed from other circumpolar cultures, the Evenki, perhaps, or even the ancient peoples who crossed the Bering Land Bridge, but the archaeological record isn't clear enough to say definitively. While the ice melts, you finally begin to shed some layers. The outermost reindeer coat comes off, so stiff with frozen condensation that it stands up on its own when you lean it against the wall. The layers beneath are damp with sweat, which is exactly what you were trying to avoid. You'll need to dry these thoroughly before wearing them again, which means hanging them near the stove for several hours. In the meantime, you're down to your inner wool layers, and the relative warmth of the house, remember, still below freezing, feels almost tropical. Your daughter, Adalina, emerges from the sleeping area, a separate room insulated with extra layers of felt and reindeer hide. She's 8 years old, and she's already learning the routines that will define her life if she chooses to stay in Yakutia. Right now, she's responsible for collecting the condensation water. In a house this cold, moisture from cooking, breathing, and the melting ice condenses on the walls and windows. Left alone, it would freeze into thick sheets of interior ice. So Adalina makes rounds with a metal scraper and a bucket, collecting the condensation before it freezes solid. The water she collects, maybe 5 liters a day, goes into a separate container and is used for washing, not drinking. It's not sterile, but it's good enough for cleaning. The ice in the trough is about half melted now, and Sarjalana adds the final hot stones. The resulting water, maybe 60 liters from this block, will be divided up, 20 liters into the drinking water barrel, which has a lid to prevent evaporation and contamination, 20 liters into the cooking water pot, a massive iron cauldron that sits on a warming shelf near the stove, and the rest into buckets for washing. You'll go through all of this before evening, and then you'll need to melt another block for the night and tomorrow morning. Let's talk about what this means for daily hygiene, because you're probably wondering how anyone stays clean in these conditions. The short answer is you don't, not by modern standards. Full-body bathing in winter is a weekly event at best, and it requires a massive investment of fuel and water. You have a small bathhouse, a separate structure, like a sauna, that you fire up once a week, heating it to nearly 40 degrees Celsius inside while it's minus 65 degrees Celsius outside. The thermal shock to the building is intense, and you can hear the logs cracking and popping as they expand. You melt enough ice to fill a large basin, and the family takes turns bathing. It's efficient but not particularly comfortable, and the walk from the bathhouse back to the main house, even wrapped in layers, is a sprint against hypothermia. Daily washing is more limited. Face, hands, underarms, the basics. You use minimal water heated on the stove, and you're quick about it. Your skin gets dry, brutally dry. The air inside the house, despite the moisture from cooking and melting ice, is still incredibly arid because the cold outside acts like a massive desiccant, pulling moisture from everything. Everyone in the family uses animal fat-based salves on their skin, traditional preparations made from rendered reindeer fat mixed with local plant extracts. It works better than any commercial lotion you've ever tried, which makes sense given that your ancestors have been formulating this stuff for centuries in exactly these conditions. Now, breakfast. Sarjalana has prepared salamat, a traditional sake dish made from butter, flour, and water, all stirred together in a pan until it forms a thick, porridge-like consistency. It's incredibly calorie-dense, necessary when you're burning 5,000 to 6,000 calories a day just staying warm and working. Alongside it, there's frozen raw fish stroganina, shaved into paper-thin slices. You eat it while it's still frozen, letting it melt slightly in your mouth. It sounds barbaric until you try it and realize that fish frozen at minus 65 degrees Celsius has a texture and flavor completely different from anything you'd get in a conventional freezer. The extreme cold causes the water in the fish's cells to crystallize in a way that preserves the cell structure almost perfectly. There's also tea, of course. Tea is essential. Hot liquid that warms you from the inside, provides hydration, and gives you a moment to sit down and be human. You drink it from a traditional wooden cup, which doesn't conduct heat like metal or ceramic, so you can hold it comfortably even when the tea is near boiling. You eat quickly but not hurriedly. Adalina chatters about something she saw outside yesterday. A fox, she thinks, though it might have been an Arctic hare. Sarjalana mentions that one of the hens in the chicken coop, a tiny, heavily insulated structure attached to the house, barely large enough for 6 birds, has stopped laying. This is normal in winter. Chickens need light to produce eggs, and there's no light, but it's still worth noting. Your son, Njurgen, who's 14, comes in from outside where he's been checking the perimeter fence. This fence doesn't keep animals in, it keeps predators out. Or at least it's supposed to. He reports that the northwestern section has frost heave damage. The freezing and expanding ground has pushed one of the posts out of alignment. You'll need to fix that today. A gap in the fence is an invitation to wolves, and wolves in Yakutia are not like their counterparts in warmer climates. These are enormous animals, some weighing over 60 kilograms, and they're desperate for food during the winter. A flock of reindeer or even a young horse is an opportunity they won't pass up. Historians still argue about whether Yakutian wolves are a distinct subspecies or simply gray wolves adapted to extreme conditions, but anyone who's lived here will tell you they're different. They're smarter, more cautious, and more willing to test human defenses. Your grandfather used to tell stories about wolves that would watch a homestead for days, learning the patterns, finding the weaknesses. You've seen it yourself, tracks circling the property, always just out of rifle range, patient and calculating. Breakfast is over in 15 minutes. There's no lingering, no second cups of tea. Outside, the twilight has reached its peak brightness. The sun is technically above the horizon now, though you can barely tell. It's a pale disk behind perpetual haze, providing light but almost no warmth. The thermometer has climbed to minus 62 degrees Celsius. Positively balmy. You suit up again, layering back into the clothes that have been drying by the stove. They're still slightly damp in places, which means they'll freeze against your skin in the first few minutes outside. It's unavoidable. You've learned to tolerate the discomfort because the alternative, waiting until they're completely dry, would mean wasting half the day. Njurgen comes with you to fix the fence. He's old enough now to handle the real work, and you need to teach him everything because someday, maybe soon, maybe years from now, this will all be his responsibility. The fence post is indeed pushed up by frost heave, a common problem in permafrost regions. The ground freezes and expands unevenly, and anything embedded in it gets shifted around. You have replacement posts pre-cut and ready. You learned long ago to prepare supplies in bulk during the brief summer, and the two of you work together to remove the damaged post and install a new one. The work is brutal. You're digging into frozen ground with a metal bar, chipping away ice, and your arms are screaming after 10 minutes. Jurgen spells you and you spell him back. It takes nearly an hour to get the new post in and secured. Your hands are numb despite the mittens. Your face, what little is exposed around your protective mask, feels like leather. But the fence is fixed. The perimeter is secure. Your animals are safe for another night. In Yakutia, this counts as a major victory. With the fence secured, you and Jurgen trudge back toward the barn through snow that's now illuminated by the thin, anemic sunlight of midday. The shadows you cast are long and pale, stretched out across the white expanse like ghostly echoes. It's 11:30 a.m. The sun is at its highest point, barely 20 degrees above the horizon. And in another 2 hours, it'll begin its descent back into darkness. This is your window. This is when you feed the animals their main meal of the day because they need light, however weak, to eat properly and because you need to see what you're doing. The hay barn sits about 30 meters from the livestock barn, far enough that a fire in one won't immediately spread to the other, close enough that you're not hauling feed across vast distances and killing cold. You unlock the heavy wooden door. The lock is a simple bar system because metal locks freeze and jam at these temperatures, and step inside. The smell of dried grass hits you immediately, sweet and summery, completely at odds with the frozen world outside. This barn has no heat source, no animals breathing warmth into it. The temperature inside is exactly the same as outside, minus 62 degrees Celsius. But the hay itself is slightly warmer, maybe minus 58 degrees Celsius, because the dense packed bales retain heat from when they were stored months ago, releasing it infinitesimally slowly. Here's what most people don't understand about hay in extreme cold. It doesn't behave like hay in normal conditions. At minus 60 degrees Celsius, hay becomes brittle. The individual grass stalks, which would normally bend and compress, instead snap and shatter. The moisture that was in the grass when it was cut and dried, never completely removed, maybe 5 to 8% water content, has frozen into ice crystals within the plant cells. This makes the hay sharp. You've cut your hands on frozen hay even through gloves. It's like handling straw made of glass. You grab a bale about 20 kilograms, and immediately the stalks crack and pop under your grip. Jurgen takes another bale, grunting with effort. You need 6 bales for the morning feeding, 4 for the horses, 2 for the reindeer. That's 120 kilograms of feed that you'll haul to the livestock barn. You could make multiple trips, but every time you open the livestock barn door, you let out precious accumulated warmth. Better to make one trip with everything you need. The two of you load the bales onto a wooden sled, the same kind used for hauling ice, for hauling firewood, for hauling everything because wheels are useless in winter. You pull it together, one on each side, across the 30 meters of frozen landscape. Your breath clouds around you in thick plumes. Jurgen says something, but his voice is muffled by the scarf wrapped around his face, and you just nod. Conversation in minus 62 degrees Celsius is minimal because every word requires you to breathe, and every breath pulls moisture from your body. Inside the livestock barn, the animals stir and shuffle when they smell the hay. They know what's coming. The temperature in here has dropped since this morning. You estimate it's around minus 40 degrees Celsius now, which means the animal's collective body heat has brought it up nearly 20 degrees from the outside temperature. You can see your breath, but it's not the immediate crystallization you get outside. The air feels almost comfortable, which is how you know you've been outside too long. When minus 40 degrees Celsius feels comfortable, your baseline has shifted dangerously. Now comes the feeding process, and this is where things get technical. You can't just throw frozen hay to the animals and expect them to eat it. At these temperatures, the hay is too cold and too brittle. If a horse tries to eat it directly, the frozen stalks can cut the inside of its mouth. More critically, eating frozen feed would lower the animal's core body temperature. Remember, these animals are surviving by maintaining a careful metabolic balance, generating enough heat to stay alive but not so much that they burn through their energy reserves too quickly. Forcing them to warm up frozen food in their digestive systems would tip that balance in the wrong direction. So you have to warm the hay first. Not to room temperature, obviously. There's no such thing as room temperature in here. But you need to bring it up from minus 60 degrees Celsius to at least minus 20 degrees Celsius. And you need to do it quickly because you have 12 horses and 30 reindeer waiting to eat. Your system for this is ingenious if you do say so yourself. In the center of the barn, you've set up what amounts to a hay warming station. A large area of the floor cleared of bedding, bordered by straw bales to create a shallow pit. Into this pit, you place heated stones, the same river stones you use for melting ice, heated to a dull red glow in the small fire you've maintained since this morning. The stones go down first, then you layer the frozen hay bales on top of them, breaking the bales apart as you go so the hay spreads out in a loose mat. The effect is immediate. You can hear the hay crackling and popping as the ice crystals within it begin to sublimate, changing directly from ice to water vapor without passing through a liquid phase, because the air is so dry. Steam rises from the hay pile, creating a small cloud near the ceiling. The barn fills with the smell of warm grass, and the animals press closer, eager. This process takes about 20 minutes. While you wait, you perform another health inspection of the herd. You move among the horses, running your hands along their flanks, checking their eyes, lifting hooves to check for ice accumulation or damage. The Yakut horses are stocky animals, nothing like the thoroughbreds you might see in a Kentucky Derby. They stand maybe 135 centimeters at the shoulder, have bodies like barrels, and legs that seem almost comically short in proportion. But those bodies and those legs are perfectly adapted to this environment. The compact build minimizes surface area relative to volume, reducing heat loss. The short legs mean less extremity to keep warm. One of the mares, her name, if you translated it, would be something like strong wind, nuzzles your shoulder as you check her hooves. She's pregnant, due to foal in late April when temperatures might be warm enough, barely, for a newborn to survive. Pregnancy in a Yakut horse is a calculated risk. The mare needs extra calories to support the developing foal, which means more hay, which means depleting your stores faster. But foals are how you maintain your herd, how you replace aging animals, how you build wealth. Strong wind is one of your best mares. Good temperament, strong build, proven mother. If she can carry this foal to term and deliver it successfully, you'll have a valuable addition to your herd. Historians note that the Saka people have been selectively breeding horses for cold tolerance for over a millennium, creating what is essentially a distinct breed. Modern genetic studies show that Yakut horses have unique adaptations in their genes related to fat metabolism and cold tolerance, changes that distinguish them from all other horse breeds on Earth. Whether these changes arose through natural selection, deliberate breeding, or a combination of both is still debated in academic circles, but the result is undeniable. These horses can survive conditions that would kill other horses within days. The hay is warm enough now. You grab a pitchfork, wooden-tined because metal would be dangerously cold to handle even through gloves, and begin distributing it to the feeding areas. Each horse gets its own spot, enough separation that they're not competing aggressively. The dominant stallion gets his first. That's the hierarchy you maintain. Then the mares, then the younger horses. They dig in immediately, chomping through the warm hay with obvious pleasure. The reindeer are more chaotic. They don't have a clear hierarchy like the horses, and they don't mind eating shoulder to shoulder. You spread their portion of hay in a long line, and they descend on it like a gentle stampede, 30 sets of antlers bobbing and weaving. Reindeer are smaller than horses. An adult might weigh 100 kilograms compared to a horse's 400, but they're hardier in some ways. They can dig through deeper snow to reach forage, and they'll eat lichen and moss that horses won't touch. In the brief summer, you let them range widely, grazing on the tundra vegetation. In winter, they're dependent on your hay. A quirky fact about reindeer that surprises most people: their noses are specially adapted to warm and humidify the air they breathe. The blood vessels in their nasal passages are arranged in a heat exchange system that captures warmth from exhaled air and uses it to pre-warm inhaled air. It's so efficient that a reindeer can breathe minus 60 degrees Celsius air, and the air reaching its lungs is nearly body temperature. Horses don't have this adaptation to the same degree, which is one reason why Yakut horses prefer to keep their heads low, breathing air that's been slightly warmed by proximity to the ground and their own bodies. While the animals eat, you check the water situation. The basin from this morning still has some liquid water, kept from freezing by the residual heat from the banked fire. You break the thin skim of ice on the surface and check the volume. Not enough for the evening watering. You'll need to melt more ice this afternoon. The cycle never ends. Melt ice, distribute water, feed animals, maintain barn, repair fence, melt more ice, distribute more water. Every day, the same tasks, because skipping even one could cascade into disaster. Jürgen is checking the reindeer now, counting them, looking for any that are limping or showing signs of distress. He's gotten good at this, you notice. He moves among them confidently, and they don't spook. He has the touch, the instinct that separates adequate herders from good ones. You feel a mixture of pride and melancholy. Pride because your son is learning, becoming capable. Melancholy because this life is brutally hard, and part of you wishes he could escape to something easier, somewhere warmer. But that's not a choice you can make for him. He'll decide, when he's older, whether to stay or leave. The feeding is almost complete when you notice something wrong. One of the younger reindeer, a male maybe 2 years old, isn't eating. He's standing apart from the others, head down, breathing rapidly. You approach carefully, and as you get closer, you see it. His muzzle is covered in frost, thick white rime that shouldn't be there. Frost on the muzzle means labored breathing, moisture condensing from breath that's too rapid, too stressed. You catch him, he doesn't resist much, which is another bad sign, and examine him more closely. His eyes are dull. His flanks are heaving. You run your hand along his side and feel it. Heat. The reindeer has a fever, which in minus 62 degrees Celsius ambient temperature means his body is burning through calories at an unsustainable rate trying to fight off some infection. You don't know what kind, could be respiratory, could be digestive, could be a dozen different things. What you do know is that, without intervention, he'll be dead by tomorrow morning. You call Jürgen over, and together you move the sick reindeer to a separate section of the barn. A small pen you keep for exactly this purpose. You pile extra hay around him for insulation and drape a reindeer hide over his back. From a locked cabinet, kept locked so the animals can't get into it, you retrieve a bottle of broad-spectrum antibiotic powder that you bought in Yakutsk 2 summers ago. It's expensive, maybe a week's worth of income from selling reindeer meat, but it's this or watch the animal die. You mix the powder with a small amount of warm water, creating a bitter-smelling paste, and force it down the reindeer's throat. He struggles weakly, but you and Jürgen manage it. Will it work? Maybe. Veterinary medicine in Yakutia is part science, part prayer, and part luck. You don't have access to diagnostics, can't run blood tests, can't get x-rays. You treat symptoms, make educated guesses, and hope. The sick reindeer settles into the hay, still breathing rapidly but at least calm. You'll check on him every few hours, bring him water, make sure he's eating if he'll eat. That's all you can do. The rest of the herd has finished eating now, and the barn has settled into a peaceful torpor. Full bellies, relative warmth, the deep biological satisfaction of being fed and safe. The horses are starting to lie down. Not all of them. They take shifts, some standing guard while others rest. And the reindeer are chewing their cud, a rhythmic grinding sound that fills the space. You and Jürgen gather the empty sled and prepare to head back outside. Before you go, you bank the fire in the melting basin, covering it with ash to preserve the coals. You'll revive it this evening for the night watering. You take one last look around, counting animals, checking for any other issues, and then you extinguish the lamp to save kerosene. Outside, the sun has already begun its descent. It's only 1:30 p.m., but the light is fading, the blue of the sky deepening toward that twilight darkness that will dominate until tomorrow morning. The temperature has actually dropped slightly. The thermometer now reads minus 64 degrees Celsius. The warmest part of the day has come and gone. You have maybe 3 more hours of usable light. In that time, you need to haul firewood for the night, check the chicken coop, repair a section of the roof on the hay barn that you noticed was loose, and begin preparations for the evening feeding. The work never stops. Remember that salamat you had for breakfast? Those calories are nearly gone, burned through by the simple act of existing in this temperature. But the animals are fed. The sick reindeer has medicine in him. The fence is repaired. These are small victories, the daily triumphs that keep you going. In Yakutia, you measure success not in grand achievements, but in making it through one more day with your family and your herd intact. The hay, warmed and distributed, has bought you another 16 hours before you'll need to feed them again. In the mathematics of survival at minus 64 degrees Celsius, that counts as winning. The afternoon light, what little there is, has taken on that peculiar quality unique to Arctic winters. A dim, directionless glow that seems to come from the snow itself rather than the sun. It's 2:15 p.m., and you're standing outside the livestock barn with Njurgen, both of you catching your breath after the feeding session. Your face feels tight where the moisture from your breath has frozen on your scarf and mask, creating a stiff plate of ice pressed against your cheeks. You need to address this before it becomes a problem. Prolonged contact with ice can cause frostbite even through fabric. So you pull the mask away from your face for just a moment, letting the frozen condensation crack and fall away. The blast of minus 64 degrees Celsius air against your exposed skin is like being slapped with a frozen hand, and you quickly pull the mask back into place. Njurgen does the same, and in that brief moment you see his face. Red cheeks, frost on his eyebrows, but his eyes are bright, alert. Good. He's managing the cold, not fighting it, which is the key to survival out here. Fighting the cold, getting angry about it, tensing up against it, just burns calories faster and clouds your judgment. You have to accept it, work with it, respect it as an adversary that cannot be defeated, only endured. But now comes one of the most critical and nerve-wracking parts of your daily routine. The physical inspection of each animal for frostbite, frozen extremities, and eye problems. This is delicate work that requires you to remove your heavy mittens and work with just thin liner gloves, because you need finger dexterity to check hooves, feel for swelling, examine eyes and ears closely. And you'll be doing this in a barn that's minus 40 degrees Celsius, handling animals whose body heat is the only thing keeping the space from being completely lethal. You start with the horses because they're more tolerant of handling and because frostbite in horses tends to show up in predictable places. Ear tips, lower legs, and around the cornet band where the hoof meets the leg. You approach the dominant stallion first, a massive animal named, appropriately enough, Cold Wind in Saka. He's been with your family for 9 years, and he knows this routine. He stands patiently as you run your hands down his front legs, feeling for any spots that are harder or colder than they should be. The legs feel normal, cold, obviously, but uniformly so, with no frozen patches. You move to his ears, gently squeezing the tips. Ears are vulnerable because they're thin, exposed, and have limited blood circulation at the extremities. A frozen ear tip feels different from a cold ear tip. It's rigid, almost brittle, and the tissue doesn't respond to pressure. Cold Wind's ears are fine. You check his eyes next, looking for the telltale cloudiness that indicates corneal freezing. Yes, eyeballs can freeze, or the redness that suggests snow blindness or conjunctivitis. Clear. His hooves are next, and this is where you need the liner gloves. You lift each hoof in turn, holding it between your knees while you use a hoof pick to clear out packed snow and ice. The frog, the V-shaped soft tissue in the center of the hoof, is especially vulnerable to cold damage. If ice gets packed in there and freezes solid, it can cause pressure damage to the sensitive tissue underneath. You've seen horses go lame from this, unable to put weight on an affected hoof because every step is agony. Cold Wind's hooves are good. You set down the last one and give him a pat on his thick neck. 1 down, 11 horses to go. The next mare presents a problem immediately. Her name is Morning Star, and when you check her left rear leg, you feel it. A patch of tissue on the cornet band that's harder than the surrounding area and slightly swollen. Frostbite. Early stage, probably, but it needs treatment now before it progresses to tissue death and potential infection. You call Njurgen over, and together you move Morning Star to a clearer area with better light from the window. In your heavy coat, you're carrying a small medical kit, leather pouch actually, that your grandmother made, designed specifically to be kept close to your body where the contents won't freeze solid. Inside, antibiotic ointment in a metal tube, kept warm by your body heat, bandaging material, a small bottle of iodine solution, and needles and thread for suturing if needed. The treatment for early-stage frostbite is counterintuitive. You don't warm the tissue rapidly. Rapid warming can cause more damage than the initial freezing. Instead, you need to warm it gradually, and you need to prevent infection while the damaged tissue either recovers or sloughs off. You apply a thin layer of the antibiotic ointment to the affected area, working quickly because even this small amount of exposure is pulling heat from your fingers through the liner gloves. And then wrap the coronet band with a bandage that you've kept inside your coat. Morning Star tolerates this with patient stoicism. Yakut horses have a temperament that seems almost engineered for these conditions. Calm, tolerant of handling, and remarkably resistant to panic. Historians suggest this temperament was deliberately bred into them over centuries, because a high-strung, nervous horse in these conditions would be worse than useless. It would be dangerous, both to itself and to its handlers. You make a mental note to check Morningstar's bandage this evening and reapply ointment. Frostbite wounds are prone to infection because the damaged tissue is essentially dead or dying, providing a perfect environment for bacteria. In warmer climates, this might be a minor injury. Here, it could become life-threatening if it gets infected and spreads. The rest of the horses check out fine, though one of the younger geldings has what looks like the beginning of snow blindness, mild redness in the eyes, probably from the glare of sun on snow during yesterday's brief period of brighter weather. You make another mental note. Keep that horse inside tomorrow even if the others go out. The reindeer inspection is more challenging because reindeer are less tolerant of handling than horses. They're semi-domesticated at best, retaining much of their wild instincts, and they don't appreciate being grabbed and examined. But it has to be done. You and Jürgen work together, one of you catching and holding each reindeer while the other performs the inspection. Reindeer have different vulnerabilities than horses. Their ears are smaller and furrier, so ear-tip frostbite is less common. But their hooves are more complex. They're broader, with a soft pad underneath that's excellent for walking on snow but vulnerable to ice cuts and freezing damage. And their eyes, positioned slightly differently than horses' eyes, are more prone to being irritated by wind-blown ice crystals. You work through the herd methodically. Most are fine. 3 have minor hoof issues, small cuts or abrasions that you treat with iodine. 1 has a cloudy discharge from her nose that concerns you, but her breathing seems normal and she's eating, so you mark her mentally for close observation rather than immediate intervention. And then there's the sick reindeer from this morning, the young male with the fever. You check him last in his separate pen. His breathing has slowed slightly, which could be good, fever-breaking, or bad, condition worsening. His muzzle frost is less severe, which is definitely good. You offer him water from a wooden bucket. He drinks a little, not much. You offer warm hay, he sniffs it but doesn't eat. Not great, but not disaster. The antibiotic needs time to work, assuming the infection is bacterial and assuming you've guessed the right antibiotic. There's a particular anxiety that comes with veterinary care in extreme isolation. In a city or even a town, you could call a vet, get professional diagnosis, access to a full pharmacy of medications. Here, you have your experience, your grandfather's handed-down knowledge, a limited supply of medicines you bought on your last trip to Yakutsk, and luck. That's it. The sick reindeer will either improve or he won't, and you won't really know for another 12 to 24 hours. A quirky historical detail. Before the Soviet period brought some modern medicines to Yakutia, Saka herders used an entirely different pharmacopoeia for treating livestock. Poultices made from birch bark, infusions of local plants whose names don't translate into Russian or English, and even practices that looked like shamanic ritual but were actually sophisticated folk medicine. Some of these treatments were genuinely effective. Modern pharmaceutical research has validated compounds in several traditional Saka medicinal plants. Others were probably useless, relying on placebo effect or the animal's own immune system. Historians still argue about which practices should be classified as medicine versus superstition, but the line is blurrier than you might think. The inspection complete, you step back outside with Jürgen to tackle the next task. Checking the chicken coop. Yes, chickens. In minus 64 degrees Celsius weather. It sounds insane, and maybe it is, but chickens provide eggs in summer and meat year-round, and they're surprisingly hardy if, and only if, you keep them in the right conditions. Your chicken coop is attached to the main house, sharing a wall with the living area. This is critical. The chickens benefit from the heat bleeding through the wall from your stove, and you benefit from their body heat adding a tiny bit of insulation to that wall. It's a symbiotic arrangement. The coop itself is small, maybe 2 meters by 3 meters, and currently houses 6 hens and no rooster. Roosters are aggressive and eat more than they're worth in these conditions. You open the small exterior door carefully because the hinges are frozen and forcing them could break something, and peer inside. The temperature in the coop, according to a thermometer mounted on the interior wall, is minus 12 degrees Celsius. This is about as warm as you can get without active heating, and it's warm enough. Chickens can survive minus 12 degrees Celsius if they're fed well, have water, and can huddle together. The hens are clustered on a wooden roost, all 6 of them pressed together in a feathered mass. They barely acknowledge your presence, which is normal. In winter, chickens become lethargic, conserving energy. None of them are laying eggs. They won't start again until the days get longer and temperatures rise above minus 20 degrees Celsius or so. But they're alive, which is the goal. You check their water, frozen solid, as expected. You have a metal pan specifically for this, and you swap it out with a pan of warm water you've been keeping near the stove inside the house. The warm water will stay liquid for maybe 6 hours before freezing, and by then it'll be evening and you'll swap it again. The chickens will drink when they're thirsty. Feed. You give them a mixture of grain and kitchen scraps, plus some crushed eggshells for calcium. They'll eat this slowly over the course of the day. One of the hens, an old bird, maybe 5 years old, has a patch of feathers missing on her back where the others have been pecking her. This is a dominance thing, normal flock behavior, but you keep an eye on it because if it gets worse, if they start drawing blood, you'll need to separate her or cull her. A bleeding chicken in a small enclosed space can trigger a feeding frenzy where the others literally peck her to death. The coop is cleaned weekly. You remove the layer of droppings and soiled straw, haul it to a waste pile, and replace it with fresh straw. It's another one of those tasks that sounds simple but is genuinely challenging when everything is frozen solid and you have to chop the soiled straw loose with an axe. Satisfied that the chickens are fine, you close the coop door and return to the main house with Njurgen. Inside, Sargelana and Atalina have been working on their own tasks. Sargelana has been preparing the evening meal, more salamat, plus boiled reindeer meat and root vegetables from the cellar, and Atalina has been practicing her schoolwork. Yes, schoolwork. Even here, education continues. Atalina attends school via radio, a system set up during the Soviet era and maintained to this day. 3 times a week, she sits at the table with a workbook and a small shortwave radio, listening to lessons broadcast from Yakutsk. The teachers can't see her, can't interact with her in real time, but they present lessons and assign work that she completes and that you mail to Yakutsk once a month when the mail truck makes its run. It's not an ideal education, but it's something. Njurgen did the same until he turned 14 and decided formal schooling wasn't for him. Whether Atalina will continue past the mandatory years depends on many factors. Her interest, your finances, whether she decides this life is what she wants or whether she'll seek something else. You peel off the outer layers again, hanging them by the stove. Your inner layers are damp with sweat again, unavoidable when you're doing physical work in multiple layers of insulation. Your hands, even through 2 layers of gloves, are aching and stiff. You flex them, working the fingers, trying to maintain circulation. Frostbite on your own extremities is a constant low-level concern. You've been lucky so far, no major damage, just some numbness in a couple of fingertips from an incident 3 winters ago. But you know herders who've lost fingers, toes, entire feet to frostbite. Outside, the light is failing rapidly now. It's only 3:30 p.m., but the sun has slipped below the horizon, and what remains is a deep blue twilight that will linger for maybe another hour before full darkness sets in. You have just enough time for one more critical task before evening. Checking the animal's eyes one more time with proper light. This might seem redundant, you already checked them, but eye problems in extreme cold can develop rapidly. Corneal freezing, which you mentioned earlier, is rare but catastrophic. The surface of the eye, kept warm and moist by tear production and blinking, can freeze if tear production slows or if the animal keeps its eyes open too long in extreme wind. The result is a clouded, damaged cornea that can lead to blindness and excruciating pain. You return to the barn with a kerosene lantern, bright enough to see fine details. You go through the horses again, lifting the lantern close to each face, checking for cloudiness, checking for excessive tearing or discharge, checking that the eyelids are closing properly. All clear. The reindeer next, same process. Also clear, except for the one with the nasal discharge from earlier, who now also has slightly more tears than normal in her left eye. You make a note. If this progresses, she'll need antibiotic ointment. The sick young male reindeer is sleeping in his pen, breathing more quietly now. You don't disturb him. As you leave the barn and secure the door, the first stars are appearing in the darkening sky. The temperature has dropped to minus 66 degrees Celsius. Night is coming, and with it, the coldest hours. Your animals are fed, watered, and examined. The fences are secure. The fires are maintained. You've done everything you can do. Inside the house, Sargelana has the evening meal ready. You eat together as a family, the four of you crowded around the table nearest the stove. The food is simple but filling, dense, caloric, exactly what bodies need when they're burning thousands of calories just maintaining core temperature. After dinner, you'll make one more trip to the barn to check the animals and distribute evening water. Then you'll bank the fires, seal the doors, and try to sleep through the coldest part of the night, knowing that tomorrow you'll wake up and do it all again. This is the rhythm. This is the life. Every day a battle, every night a victory if you've kept everything alive. You're lying in bed, wrapped in reindeer hides, listening to the house creak and pop in the cold. It's 3:30 a.m., and you've been awake for 10 minutes, staring at the darkness of the ceiling and trying to will yourself back to sleep. But your mind won't settle because you know what's coming. In about 6 weeks, mid-March, if the calendar and nature cooperate, your pregnant mare, Strong Wind, will give birth. And if the timing is right, one of the reindeer cows will calve around the same time. This should be good news. New life, continuation of the herd, the cycle of renewal that makes all of this backbreaking work meaningful. But calving season in Yakutia is a gamble where the stakes are life and death, and the house always has an edge. The problem is temperature. A newborn foal or reindeer calf is wet when it enters the world, covered in amniotic fluid that needs to dry and evaporate for the animal's coat to fluff up and provide insulation. In normal climates, this happens quickly enough that the newborn's body heat, combined with the mother's attention, keeps everything survivable. But in Yakutia, in March, temperatures will still be hovering around minus 30 degrees Celsius to minus 40 degrees Celsius. At those temperatures, a wet newborn can freeze to death in under 15 minutes. The amniotic fluid crystallizes on the skin, the animal's core temperature plummets, and hypothermia kills faster than the mother can possibly dry the baby by licking. So you can't let animals give birth in the regular barn, where temperatures are minus 30 degrees Celsius on a good day. You need a birthing shelter, a smaller, more heavily insulated space that can be warmed to something approaching survivable. Not warm, understand, just less lethally cold. Which is why you're lying here at 3:30 a.m., wide awake, mentally reviewing the birthing shelter that you and Jurgen have been preparing for the past 2 weeks. It's a small structure attached to the main livestock barn, maybe 3 meters by 4 meters, with walls that are nearly a meter thick, double the normal barn construction. The extra thickness comes from a sandwich construction. Logs, then a layer of packed straw, then another layer of logs, then more packed straw, then a final layer of logs. The result is a structure that, with the addition of a small, carefully managed fire, can be kept at around minus 10 degrees Celsius to minus 15 degrees Celsius. This doesn't sound warm, and it isn't, but it's warm enough for a newborn to survive the first critical hours if everything goes right. If the mother is healthy and attentive. If the birth happens quickly without complications. If you're there to assist. If you've been through this before. 5 times to be exact. 3 foals and 2 calves. 2 of the foals survived and are now part of your working herd. 1 died within an hour of birth. You were too slow getting the fire hot enough, or the foal was weak to begin with, or both, and it simply stopped breathing despite everything you tried. The 2 calves both survived, though one lost the tip of its tail to frostbite. The mathematics are brutal but clear. In your experience, you have about a 70% success rate with winter births. Professional operations in warmer climates would consider that catastrophic. Here, it's about as good as you can hope for. But Strong Wind is valuable. She's one of your best breeding mares, and the calf she's carrying represents months of feeding, care, and genetic investment. Losing it would be a financial blow and a personal failure that would gnaw at you for months. You swing out of bed, careful not to disturb Sargelana, who's still sleeping, and pull on your layers. Today's temperature, according to the indoor thermometer, is -5 degrees Celsius inside the house, which means it's probably -62 degrees Celsius or so outside. You'll check the exact reading when you get out there. You move through the dark house by feel and familiarity. You've lived here your entire life, in this very house your grandfather built, and you could navigate it blindfolded. Outside, the stars are brilliant, hard points of light in a black sky. The moon is a thin crescent, providing almost no illumination. You navigate by starlight and memory, trudging toward the main barn. The thermometer confirms your estimate, -63 degrees Celsius. The cold hits your lungs even through the careful nose-breathing technique you've perfected, and you feel that familiar ache deep in your chest. Inside the barn, you don't go to the main animal area. Instead, you go directly to the birthing shelter and begin your inspection. The walls feel solid, no new cracks, no gaps. You check the ventilation system, which is even more critical here than in the main barn because you'll be running a fire and you need to prevent carbon monoxide buildup while still retaining heat. The vent is clear. You've stockpiled supplies in here, clean, dry straw for bedding, several reindeer hides that can be used to wrap a newborn if needed, a bucket for warm water, towels made from tanned hide, more absorbent than cloth and more durable, and your medical kit. There's also a bottle of colostrum, the crucial first milk rich in antibodies, that you collected from another mare last spring and stored. If Strong Wind's milk doesn't come in immediately after birth, or if the foal is too weak to nurse, you'll need to hand-feed colostrum within the first 6 hours or the foal's immune system won't develop properly. Historians note that the Saka people developed sophisticated knowledge of animal husbandry out of sheer necessity. When you're operating at the edge of what's biologically possible, there's no room for ignorance or guesswork. Archaeological evidence suggests that even 1,000 years ago, Saka herders were using heated birthing shelters and hand-feeding newborns when necessary. The specific techniques have evolved, but the fundamental understanding that newborns need warmth, immediate nutrition, and intensive care has remained constant. The firewood supply looks good. You've stacked split logs along one wall, dry wood that will burn hot and clean. The stove itself is a small iron box, Russian-made, probably from the 1960s based on the manufacturer's mark. It's not efficient by modern standards, but it works, and replacement parts are occasionally available in Yakutsk. You'll start a fire in here about 12 hours before you think Strong Wind will give birth, bringing the temperature up gradually so the walls and floor absorb some heat and create a more stable thermal environment. But here's the challenge. How do you know when a horse is going to give birth 12 hours in advance? Horses are famously unpredictable about this. The normal gestation period is about 11 months, which puts Strong Wind's due date in mid-March, but that could vary by 2 weeks in either direction. And even once she's in active labor, the actual birth can happen within an hour or take 6 hours, and there's no way to know which it'll be. So you watch. Starting about 2 weeks before the expected due date, you increase your monitoring frequency. You check Strong Wind 4 times a day instead of twice, looking for signs. Udder development, her udder will swell and fill with milk in the days before birth. Behavioral changes, some maras become restless or isolated, others become clingy, and physical signs like a relaxing of the muscles around the tailhead. For the past 3 days, you've noticed Strong Wind's udder developing. This is good, it means her body is preparing, but it doesn't tell you exactly when. She could give birth tonight or 3 days from now or a week from now. You just don't know. Which brings us to the other element of the gamble, your sleep. Starting about now, you'll be sleeping lightly, if you can call it sleep, waking every 2 hours to check on Strong Wind. When you see active labor signs, you'll move her to the birthing shelter, start the fire, and stay with her through the entire process, which could take an hour or could take all night. This means days or potentially weeks of sleep deprivation, which in turn means decreased judgment, slower reaction times, and increased risk of accidents. Working in -60 degrees Celsius temperatures with impaired cognitive function is a good way to get yourself killed. But what's the alternative? Miss the birth, let it happen in the main barn, and almost certainly lose the foal to hypothermia? That's not acceptable. You've made your decision. You'll manage the sleep deprivation, rely on Jurgen and Sargelana to help cover some of the other daily tasks, and get through it. Somehow. You always do. A quirky detail about animal births in extreme cold. The placenta, The organ that nourishes the fetus during pregnancy and is expelled after birth becomes a critical concern. In normal climates, you dispose of it or the mother eats it. Yes, herbivores eat placenta. It's nutritious and prevents attracting predators. Here, the placenta freezes solid within minutes of being expelled, which is actually helpful in one way. It's easy to handle and dispose of, but problematic in another because you need to inspect it to make sure it's been completely expelled. A retained placenta leads to infection, and infection in a postpartum mare at these temperatures is almost always fatal. So you'll need to check the placenta while it's still somewhat pliable, which means getting to it within maybe 5 to 10 minutes of expulsion, before it freezes into a solid mass. This requires you to be present at the birth, attentive, ready to act quickly. There's no calling the vet if something goes wrong. There's no emergency clinic. There's you, your knowledge, your supplies, and your judgment. You leave the birthing shelter and check on Strong Wind in the main barn. She's standing calmly, chewing hay, showing no signs of imminent labor. Her udder is full. You can see it even in the dim lamplight, but not dripping milk yet. When the milk starts to drip, when you see the waxy discharge on the teats, you'll know birth is within 24 hours. The sick reindeer from yesterday is still in his separate pen, and you're pleased to see he's eaten some hay overnight. His breathing is quiet. His eyes are brighter. The antibiotic seems to be working. This is a small victory, the kind that keeps you going. Back in the house, you find Sargelana awake, stoking the fire. She looks at you, the unspoken question in her eyes. How close? You shake your head slightly. Not yet. She nods. She's been through this before too, knows the drill. For the next couple of weeks, life will revolve around Strong Wind's pregnancy. Everything else, repairs, maintenance, even some of the regular animal care, will be delegated or delayed. The foal comes first. Breakfast is quick and quiet. Jürgen joins you, yawning but alert. You explain the situation. Strong Wind is developing, probably within a week, possibly sooner. He needs to be ready to help. He nods seriously. At 14, he's participated in one successful birth and one that ended badly, and he understands the stakes. Adalina, bless her, asks the question that's simultaneously innocent and profound. Why do we make the horses have babies in winter? Why not wait until summer when it's warm? It's a fair question, and the answer is complicated. Ideally, yes, you time all births for summer when temperatures are survivable and the mothers have access to fresh grass for nutrition. But biology doesn't work that way. Horses and reindeer have breeding seasons influenced by daylight and temperature, and those seasons don't perfectly align with what would be convenient for humans. You breed your animals when they're naturally receptive, which often means births happen in late winter or early spring. Some herders do try to manipulate this, keeping males and females separated until a specific time to control breeding. But this requires more space, more labor, and doesn't always work because animals are not machines. They have their own drives, their own timing. So you work with what nature gives you, and that means some births happen in March when it's still minus 40 degrees Celsius, and you do your best to help them survive. The day proceeds normally, feeding, watering, maintenance, but now with the additional task of checking Strong Wind every few hours. Each time, you're looking for the same things: udder development, behavioral changes, physical signs. Each time, you're running the same mental calculations. Is it today? Tomorrow? Should I start the fire in the birthing shelter now to be safe? Or wait because burning firewood unnecessarily is wasting resources you might desperately need later? By evening, Strong Wind's udder is waxed. Tiny beads of dried colostrum on the teats, like yellowish crystals. This is the sign. Birth is close, probably within 12 to 24 hours. You make the decision. Start the fire in the birthing shelter now, begin the warming process, and prepare for a long night. Jürgen helps you carry firewood and get the stove going. The small iron box catches quickly, and you can actually feel the temperature in the tiny shelter start to rise. It'll take hours to get it up to minus 10 degrees Celsius, but that's fine. You have time. Probably. Strong Wind will stay in the main barn for now, where she's comfortable and surrounded by the other horses. When you see active labor, when she starts showing signs of contractions, when she becomes restless and paces, you'll move her the short distance to the birthing shelter. Moving a horse in active labor is risky, but leaving her to give birth in minus 35 degrees Celsius is riskier. You settle in for the night watch. You've brought a stool, a thermos of tea, and a heavy coat. You'll stay in the barn, checking strong wind every 30 minutes, dozing between checks if you can. Sarjalana will bring you food at midnight and again at dawn. Jurgen will spell you for a few hours in the early morning so you can get some real sleep. This is calving season. This is the price of maintaining a herd in the coldest permanently inhabited place on Earth. You're a midwife now, a guardian, a gambler placing a bet against thermodynamics and biology, hoping that skill and preparation will tilt the odds in your favor. Strong wind shifts her weight, and you watch her intently. Not yet, but soon. It's 2:47 a.m., 3 days after you started the vigil, and strong wind is finally in active labor. You've been dozing on the stool in the main barn, wrapped in your heaviest coat, when the change in her breathing wakes you. A deep, rhythmic pattern that's distinctly different from resting or sleeping. You're on your feet immediately, lamp in hand, moving toward her stall. She's pacing now, circling the small space, her tail raised slightly. These are the signs. This is happening. You move quickly but calmly. Panicking helps no one, and open the gate between the main barn and the birthing shelter. The shelter is warm, relatively speaking. The thermometer mounted on the wall reads minus 8 degrees Celsius, which is about as good as you're going to get. The fire in the small iron stove has been burning steadily for 72 hours now, consuming firewood at a rate that makes you wince when you think about your depleting supply, but there's no choice. This is what the wood is for. Strong wind follows you into the birthing shelter without resistance. She knows the space. You've been walking her through it twice a day for the past week, letting her get comfortable with the smaller dimensions, the different smells, the presence of the stove. Horses are creatures of habit and environment, and a stressed horse in labor is more likely to have complications. You've done everything possible to make this familiar and non-threatening. She's sweating now despite the cold. You can see the dark patches on her neck and flanks where the coat is damp. This is normal. Labor is work, intense physical work, but you monitor it carefully because excessive sweating can lead to dehydration and, in these temperatures, to dangerous heat loss once the work is done. You have buckets of water ready, kept near the stove so they're liquid, and you'll offer her drinks between contractions. The contractions are visible now. Her abdomen tightens, her whole body goes rigid for 30 seconds or so, then releases. They're coming about 10 minutes apart. You've seen this before. You're probably looking at another hour, maybe 2, before the foal actually emerges. You step outside briefly, just for a moment, and whistle, a sharp sound that cuts through the frozen night. This is the signal. Inside the house, Sarjalana will hear it and wake Jurgen. They'll know it's happening. Jurgen will come to help, and Sarjalana will prepare hot water, clean cloths, and the backup colostrum supply. Back inside the birthing shelter, you check your supplies one more time. Clean straw for bedding, check. Dry towels, check. Sharp knife, sterilized in boiling water yesterday and kept wrapped, check. Iodine solution for treating the umbilical stump, check. The bottle of emergency colostrum, kept warm near your body, check. You've done this before, but the anxiety never diminishes. Too much can go wrong. Strong wind lies down now, a good sign. Horses can give birth standing up, but lying down usually means they're comfortable and the labor is progressing normally. Her water breaks. You see the fluid gush out, steaming in the cold air, already starting to freeze in a spreading puddle on the straw. You move quickly, spreading fresh straw over it to absorb it and prevent the formation of slippery ice. Jurgen arrives, his face flushed from the sprint through minus 63 degrees Celsius air between the house and the barn. He's carrying the supplies from Sarjalana, a bucket of hot water, steaming dramatically in the cold, clean cloths, and a smaller bucket with more iodine solution. He sets them down quietly, efficiently, and positions himself where you indicate, near Strong Wind's head, ready to keep her calm if she starts to panic. The foal's front hooves appear first, which is correct. You can see them emerging, 2 small hooves encased in the white amniotic sac, positioned one slightly ahead of the other. This is the normal presentation. If you'd seen anything else, hooves backward, a single hoof, a tail, You'd be preparing for a much more complicated situation, possibly involving manual repositioning or even surgical intervention that you're not equipped to perform. But this looks good. Strong wind pushes, her whole body straining, and more of the foal emerges. The nose positioned between the two front legs. Perfect. You murmur encouragement to her. Soft words in Saka that don't translate, but that convey calm, confidence, reassurance. She's doing great. Another contraction, another push, and the head is out. The foal's eyes are closed. Its ears are pinned back against its skull. Its whole body is slick with amniotic fluid that's already starting to freeze in contact with the -8 degrees Celsius air. You move closer, ready to assist but not interfering yet. Horses have been giving birth for millions of years without human help, and sometimes the best thing you can do is stay out of the way. One more major push and the shoulders emerge. This is the hardest part for the mare. The shoulders and chest are the widest part of the foal, and strong wind grunts with effort. But they come through, and then suddenly, in a rush of fluid and motion, the entire foal is out, lying on the straw, still partially enclosed in the amniotic sac. You're moving immediately. The foal needs to breathe, and it needs to breathe now. You grab one of the dry towels and quickly but carefully tear open the amniotic sac around the foal's nose and mouth, clearing away the membrane. The foal gasps, a wet, shuddering sound, and takes its first breath. You can see its sides heaving, the tiny ribs expanding and contracting. It's alive. But now comes the critical part. The foal is soaking wet, and every second that moisture remains on its skin is pulling heat away from its body. At -8 degrees Celsius, even in this warm birthing shelter, hypothermia is an immediate threat. You and Jurgen work together, rubbing the foal vigorously with dry towels, working from the head back toward the hindquarters, stimulating circulation and absorbing as much moisture as possible. The foal is a filly, a female, which you note with satisfaction. Females are more valuable for breeding. She's small, maybe 40 kilograms, with the stocky build characteristic of Yakut horses. Her coat is dark, almost black, still slick against her body. As you rub, it begins to fluff up slightly, creating the air pockets that will provide insulation. Strong wind, meanwhile, has gotten to her feet and turned to investigate her offspring. This is crucial. You need the mare to bond with the foal immediately, to start licking and cleaning it, to provide maternal warmth and encouragement. Some maras reject their foals, stress, confusion, or just bad temperament, and a rejected foal in these conditions is a death sentence unless you can hand-raise it, which is possible but extraordinarily difficult. But strong wind is nuzzling the filly, making low wickering sounds, starting to lick the foal's face and neck. Good mare. You feel a wave of relief so intense it's almost physical. You check the umbilical cord. It's still attached, which is normal. It'll break naturally when the foal tries to stand, or you can cut it if necessary. There's no rush. The placenta is still inside strong wind, and it'll be expelled in the next 15 to 30 minutes. You need to watch for that and inspect it when it comes out. The filly is trying to stand now, a heroic and comical effort. Her legs are impossibly long and spindly, and they don't seem to work properly. She gets her front end up, then her hindquarters collapse. She tries again, gets almost vertical, and topples sideways into the straw. Jurgen is grinning despite the tension. Watching a newborn foal learn to stand is always amusing, but you're focused on the details. Is she trying vigorously, or is she weak? Vigorous. Good. Is she shivering? Yes, but that's normal. Shivering generates heat. Is the shivering excessive, uncontrolled? No. Still good. On the 5th attempt, the filly manages to stand, all 4 legs locked and trembling but holding her weight. She stands there, swaying, looking utterly baffled by this new existence outside the womb. Strong wind continues to lick her, providing encouragement and warmth. The umbilical cord breaks. A clean break, no bleeding. You move in with the iodine solution and apply it liberally to the stump. This is critical. The umbilical stump is a direct pathway into the foal's bloodstream, and in these conditions, infection can establish itself frighteningly fast. The iodine burns, you can see the filly flinch, but it'll prevent bacterial growth. 15 minutes after birth, the placenta is expelled. You grab it immediately, before it can freeze, and spread it out on clean straw, inspecting it. This is the quirky bit of veterinary knowledge that most people don't know. A placenta should be roughly Y-shaped when spread out, with no missing pieces. If pieces are missing, they're still inside the mare, and retained placenta tissue will cause a potentially fatal infection. You examine it carefully in the lamplight, running your hands over the entire surface. It looks complete. The Y-shape is intact, no obvious tears or missing sections. You ball it up and set it aside. Tomorrow, when it's fully frozen, you'll dispose of it far from the barn to avoid attracting predators. Now comes the next critical milestone, nursing. The filly needs to drink colostrum, that first, thick, antibody-rich milk, within the first 6 hours of life. Ideally, within the first 2 hours. The antibodies in colostrum are what will protect her from disease for the first months of her life until her own immune system matures. Miss this window, and the foal will be immunocompromised, vulnerable to infections that would normally be survivable. The filly is sniffing around Strong Wind's belly, instinct driving her to search for the udder. She's not coordinated yet, bumping into the mare's legs, nosing at her flank, clearly trying but not quite figuring it out. This is normal, but it's also where things can go wrong. Some foals never figure out how to nurse, or they're too weak to suckle effectively, or the mare's milk doesn't come in properly. You give them space, watching. Strong Wind is patient, standing still, letting the filly explore. The filly finds the udder, latches on to a teat, and there, she's nursing. You can see her jaw working, her throat swallowing. Strong Wind stands calmly, not moving, not kicking. Perfect. You exhale, a breath you didn't realize you were holding. She's nursing. The most critical hurdle is cleared. But you're not done. You'll stay here for at least another 2 hours, monitoring both mare and foal. Watching to make sure the filly nurses several more times. Checking that Strong Wind passes urine and manure normally. Signs that her internal systems are recovering from the birth. Watching for any signs of distress in either animal. Labored breathing, excessive sweating, strange behavior. The temperature in the birthing shelter has dropped slightly during all the activity. The door has been opened several times. Cold air has rushed in. The thermometer now reads -12 degrees Celsius. You add more wood to the stove, building the fire back up. The filly is mostly dry now, her coat fluffed up, providing reasonable insulation. But she's still vulnerable, will be vulnerable for days or weeks. Historians note that the Saka people have one of the highest success rates for winter animal births among any cold climate culture, and it's because of exactly this kind of intensive intervention. The birthing shelter, the constant monitoring, the immediate drying and warming, these aren't modern innovations. Archaeological evidence suggests similar practices going back centuries, passed down through generations, refined through countless births, countless failures, countless heartbreaking losses that taught what works and what doesn't. Outside, you can hear the wind picking up. Not a storm, just the usual night wind that sweeps across the taiga. It's currently -64 degrees Celsius out there, according to Jürgen, who checked the thermometer when he arrived. In that temperature, this newborn filly would have been dead in 10 minutes, frozen solid in 15. But in here, in this small heated shelter, wrapped in the warmth from the stove and her mother's body, she's alive. She's standing, she's nursing, she's existing against all thermodynamic probability. You sit down on the stool, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that's been sustaining you through the birth is fading, and you feel the weight of 3 days of minimal sleep, constant vigilance, and physical labor. Jürgen offers to take the next watch. He'll stay here, keep the fire going, monitor mare and foal while you go back to the house for a few hours of real sleep. You consider refusing. You're the experienced one, the one who knows all the subtle signs of trouble. But you're also human, and humans need sleep, and Jürgen is capable. He's proven that tonight. You accept his offer. Before you leave, you check the filly one more time. She's lying down now, curled in the straw next to Strong Wind, who's also lying down, her neck curved protectively around her offspring. Both are breathing quietly, calmly. One birth down. One healthy filly alive against the odds. In a few weeks, if all goes well, you'll have a reindeer calf too, and you'll go through this entire process again. But tonight, this is victory. This is why you do this impossible work in this impossible place. You step out into the minus 64 degrees Celsius darkness, and for once, the cold feels almost welcoming. You're alive, your animals are alive, and against the second law of thermodynamics and the hostility of nature, you've created life. Tomorrow, the work continues, but tonight, you'll sleep. The filly is 5 days old now, and the relief you felt at her successful birth has been replaced by a different kind of constant vigilance. She survived the most critical period, those first 48 hours when everything from hypothermia to failure to nurse to random infection could have killed her. But she's far from safe. At minus 61 degrees Celsius outside, it's warmed up slightly, if you can call it that. Even a healthy foal is vulnerable in ways that would never occur to someone raising horses in Kentucky or Mongolia or anywhere else that counts as habitable by normal standards. You're standing in the birthing shelter at 6:30 a.m., watching the filly investigate her surroundings with the unsteady curiosity of all young animals. She's stronger now, more coordinated. Her legs don't look quite so impossibly long and fragile. She can trot, a bouncing, enthusiastic gait that lacks any grace but demonstrates vigor. Strong Wind watches her offspring with the patient attention of a good mother, occasionally nickering soft encouragement. But here's the problem you're facing now. The birthing shelter, as critical as it was for the birth, is not a long-term solution. It's too small for a growing, active foal. Strong Wind is starting to show signs of stress from the confinement, pawing at the straw, pressing against the walls. And you're burning through firewood at an unsustainable rate, keeping the temperature at minus 10 degrees Celsius. At your current consumption, you'll exhaust your entire winter supply by mid-April, leaving nothing for the final cold months before spring truly arrives. So you need to transition mare and foal to the main barn, where temperatures hover around minus 35 degrees Celsius. This doesn't sound like a massive change, going from minus 10 degrees Celsius to minus 35 degrees Celsius. But for a 5-day-old foal with limited body mass and still developing thermoregulation, it's significant. The move has to be managed carefully, and even then, there are no guarantees. The transition process starts today. You've been gradually reducing the fire in the birthing shelter over the past 2 days, letting the temperature drop slowly. Minus 10 degrees Celsius, then minus 12 degrees Celsius, then minus 15 degrees Celsius, now currently sitting at minus 18 degrees Celsius. The filly has adapted to each step, her body learning to generate more metabolic heat, her coat fluffing up more effectively. Today, you'll drop it to minus 22 degrees Celsius, and if she handles that well, tomorrow you'll move both animals to the main barn. The main barn, meanwhile, has been prepared. You've created a separate pen for Strong Wind and the filly, about 4 meters by 4 meters, large enough for movement but small enough that their combined body heat will keep it slightly warmer than the rest of the barn. You've layered the floor with extra thick straw bedding and hung reindeer hides on the walls to provide additional insulation and break up drafts. Jürgen has been helping with all of this, and he's getting good at anticipating what's needed before you ask. Right now he's in the main barn, checking the pen one final time, making sure there are no gaps or sharp edges or anything that could injure a clumsy foal. This is the kind of detail work that separates successful herders from dead animals. While the filly and Strong Wind are your immediate concern, you haven't forgotten about the rest of the herd. In fact, the daily work of caring for 30 reindeer and 11 other horses continues exactly as before, except now you're also managing the birthing shelter, which means your workday has expanded from about 14 hours to roughly 18. You're functioning on 4 to 5 hours of sleep per night, and you can feel it, a constant low-level exhaustion, a slight delay in your thought processes, a tendency to make small mistakes that you then have to correct. Sargelana has taken over some of your usual tasks. She's managing the household ice melting and water distribution, and she's taken primary responsibility for the chickens. Adalina is helping more too, feeding the chickens and collecting eggs. Not that there are any in winter, but the routine continues. Even in an 8-year-old's limited way, she's contributing to the family's survival. But there's one task that only you can do, and it's become the most dangerous part of your routine: dealing with predators. 3 nights ago, you found wolf tracks in the snow about 50 meters from the barn. The tracks were large. You estimate the animal weighs at least 60 kilograms, and they circled the perimeter, approaching from downwind where the wolves couldn't be scented by the horses or reindeer. The wolf was investigating, learning, planning. This is a problem. A big problem. Wolves in Yakutia are patient, intelligent hunters, and a newborn foal or a sick reindeer. Remember the young male with the fever. He's recovered, but he was vulnerable for several days. Represents an opportunity. The fences will stop a casual investigation, but a determined wolf can dig under a fence, jump a fence, or even find a weakness and exploit it. And if one wolf finds success, others will follow. You could wake up one morning to find the reindeer scattered, several killed, and the survivors traumatized into uselessness. So you've started doing night patrols. Every night at around midnight and again at 4 a.m., you suit up in your heaviest gear and walk the perimeter of your property with a rifle. A bolt-action hunting rifle, Russian-made, reliable in cold that would jam most modern firearms. You're not looking to hunt wolves, exactly. You're looking to make your presence known, to establish that this territory is actively defended by a human with a weapon. These patrols are genuinely dangerous. You're alone, at night, in temperatures that can kill you in minutes if something goes wrong. If you fall and injure yourself, if your rifle jams and you encounter a wolf pack, if you get disoriented in blowing snow and can't find your way back. Any of these scenarios could be fatal. But the alternative is losing animals that represent your family's wealth, food security, and livelihood. So you walk the perimeter, and you watch the darkness, and you listen for sounds that don't belong. The padding of paws on snow, the soft panting of a predator, the subtle rustling that indicates movement. Last night's patrol was particularly tense. You found fresh tracks again, closer this time, only 30 meters from the fence, and you heard something, a sound that might have been wind in the trees or might have been something breathing. You stood still for 10 minutes, rifle ready, scanning the darkness with your weak flashlight. Batteries lose efficiency in extreme cold, so the beam was dim and yellowish. Nothing revealed itself, but you know they're out there, watching, waiting. A quirky historical note. The relationship between Saka herders and wolves has always been complex. Wolves are threats, yes, but they're also respected as fellow predators, survivors in the same brutal environment. Traditional Saka culture includes stories and songs about wolves, acknowledging their intelligence and persistence. Some old herders claim you can negotiate with wolves, leave offerings of meat at the territory boundary, establish a kind of non-aggression understanding, but whether this actually works or is just folklore is debated among historians. What's not debated is that wolves are opportunistic and hungry, and a herder who doesn't actively defend his animals will lose them. You've considered more aggressive measures. Traps, poison, organized hunting parties with neighbors to reduce the local wolf population. But traps are unreliable in this cold. Metal springs freeze and fail to trigger, and poison is indiscriminate, potentially killing foxes, ravens, or even dogs. Hunting parties require coordination with neighbors who are themselves busy with their own herds, and even successful hunts only temporarily reduce the wolf population. They always come back, so you fall back on the traditional method: vigilance, presence, and the willingness to shoot if necessary. You've killed wolves before, 3 in the past 5 years, and you'll kill more if you have to. It's not something you enjoy, but it's necessary. Back to the present moment. You reduce the fire in the birthing shelter, watching the temperature slowly drop. The filly notices, you can see her shiver slightly, but she doesn't seem distressed. She presses closer to strong wind, taking advantage of her mother's body heat. This is good. This is the behavior you want to see. By evening, the temperature in the birthing shelter has dropped to minus 22 degrees Celsius, and both mare and foal are handling it well. The filly is nursing frequently, which is perfect. More nursing means more caloric intake, which means more metabolic heat generation. Strong wind's milk production seems robust. You can see the filly's belly distending after each nursing session. Tomorrow, you'll make the move to the main barn. You're nervous about it, you've lost foals during this transition before, but delaying any longer would mean burning firewood you can't spare. The evening feeding goes smoothly. The horses get their warm hay, the reindeer get theirs. Everyone drinks their allotment of water. The sick reindeer is fully recovered now, back with the main herd, showing no signs of the infection that nearly killed him. Small victories accumulate. After the feeding, you make your rounds checking for injuries, frostbite, eye problems, the usual inspection routine. Everything looks good. One of the horses has a small cut on his shoulder. probably from scraping against something, but it's superficial and clean. You apply antibiotic ointment anyway, because in this environment, even small wounds can become serious infections if not treated. Dinner is reindeer stew with root vegetables and fat dumplings. Calorie-dense food that sits heavy in your stomach in the best possible way. You eat mechanically, too tired to really taste it, but grateful for the warmth and the fuel it provides. Jürgen mentions that he spotted a fox near the chicken coop this afternoon. Foxes are less of a threat than wolves. They're too small to take down a reindeer or horse, but they'll absolutely kill chickens if they can get into the coop. You make a note to check the coop's security tomorrow, reinforce any weak points. After dinner, you try to sleep for a few hours before the midnight patrol. Sleep comes quickly, you're that exhausted, but it's not restful. You dream of wolves, of the filly freezing despite your efforts, of fires burning out and temperatures plummeting. Anxiety dreams, the subconscious processing of constant stress. At 11:45 p.m., you force yourself awake and begin the layering process again. Outside, it's minus 62 degrees Celsius, and the stars are brilliant. The moon has waxed to half full, providing decent illumination. You can see your shadow on the snow as you begin your patrol, rifle slung over your shoulder, flashlight in hand. The perimeter is quiet. No fresh tracks, no sounds except the squeak of your boots on frozen snow and the occasional crack of a tree splitting in the cold. You complete the full circuit, about 800 meters total, and return to the barn to check the animals one final time before heading back to the house. Everyone is asleep or resting. The filly is curled against strong wind, both breathing quietly. The temperature in the birthing shelter has stabilized at minus 22 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow's move will be challenging, but you're as prepared as you can be. You return to the house, strip off the frozen outer layers, and collapse into bed. 3.5 hours until the 4 a.m. patrol. 3.5 hours of sleep if you're lucky. This is your life. This is livestock farming at minus 62 degrees Celsius, where every day is a battle against predators, weather, and the fundamental laws of physics that dictate that heat flows from warm to cold, and you are warm and everything around you is desperately, lethally cold. But the filly is alive. Strong wind is healthy. The herd is intact. Against all odds, against all common sense, you're succeeding. Tomorrow, you'll transition the filly to the main barn, and if that goes well, you'll have cleared another major hurdle. And then, in a few more weeks, one of the reindeer cows will calve, and you'll do this entire process again with a different species and a different set of challenges. The work never ends. But neither does the stubborn, unreasonable determination to keep going, to keep your animals alive, to maintain this impossibly precarious existence in the coldest inhabited place on Earth. You close your eyes and sleep takes you under. It's early April now, and the world is beginning its slow, grudging transformation towards something resembling spring. The temperature has warmed to a balmy minus 28 degrees Celsius during the day, though it still drops to minus 45 degrees Celsius at night. The sun is above the horizon for nearly 12 hours now, and the quality of light has changed. It's brighter, more substantial, actually capable of casting sharp shadows and providing a tiny amount of genuine warmth if you stand in a sheltered spot out of the wind. Strong Wind's filly, you've named her New Dawn in Saka, is thriving. She's 7 weeks old now, fully integrated into the main barn, and her growth has been remarkable. She's put on maybe 15 kilograms, her legs have thickened with muscle, and she's developed the characteristic stocky build of a Yakut horse. She plays now, racing around the barn in short bursts of energy, bucking and kicking at imaginary threats, practicing the movements that will eventually make her a capable adult horse. The reindeer calf was born 3 weeks ago. Another successful birth in the heated shelter, another nail-biting transition to the main barn, another small victory. The calf is male, which is fine. Males can be raised for meat or trained as draft animals. He's healthy, nursing vigorously, and already showing the independent streak characteristic of reindeer. Unlike the foal, who stays close to her mother, the calf wanders freely among the adult reindeer, testing boundaries, learning the herd's social structure. But now, as winter's grip finally begins to loosen, you're facing a different challenge entirely, and it's one that defines life in Yakutia as much as the cold itself. Isolation. You're sitting at the kitchen table with Sarjalana, reviewing your supplies and making lists. Not wish lists, survival lists. Lists of what you absolutely must acquire in the coming months to make it through next winter. The radio crackles in the background, a weather report in Russian that you half listen to out of habit. Clear skies predicted for the next week, temperatures rising to minus 15 degrees Celsius. Perfect travel weather, relatively speaking. Here's what most people don't understand about living in extreme isolation. You can't just go to a store when you need something. The nearest town of any size, Yakutsk, population about 300,000, is 200 kilometers away over roads that are only passable during certain seasons. In winter, the roads are frozen solid, which sounds good until you realize that frozen solid includes the rivers, and the route to Yakutsk crosses 3 major rivers that you have to drive across on ice, hoping it's thick enough to support your vehicle's weight. In spring and fall, the roads become impassable mud. The permafrost beneath melts unevenly, creating sinkholes and bogs that can swallow a truck. In summer, the roads are merely terrible. Rutted, dusty, prone to washouts. The only truly reliable transportation to Yakutsk is in deep winter when everything is frozen, or by helicopter, which costs more money than your family earns in several months. So you make 1, maybe 2 trips to Yakutsk per year. And those trips have to accomplish everything. Buying supplies, selling animals or animal products, medical checkups for the family, purchasing medicine and veterinary supplies, replacing worn-out equipment, and handling any bureaucratic requirements, paperwork, licenses, tax documentation. Your last trip was in November, before the coldest months hit. Now, in April, you're planning the spring trip, which will happen in about 3 weeks when the roads are still frozen but the temperatures are warm enough that traveling won't be immediately life-threatening. The list is long. You need veterinary antibiotics. You've used most of your supply on the sick reindeer and the filly's umbilical treatment. Salt blocks for the animals, they need salt supplementation, and you're down to 1 block. Kerosene for the lamps, you've been rationing it, using candles when possible, but you'll need more. Flour, sugar, tea, and other staples that you can't produce yourself. Ammunition for the rifle, you've used 7 rounds this winter on wolf warning shots and 1 kill. Replacement parts for the snowmobile, the drive belt is showing wear. Fabric for clothing repair. School supplies for Ada Lina. Medicine for humans, pain relievers, antibiotics, basic first aid supplies. Each item represents a calculated decision about money versus necessity. You have a limited budget, the cash you earned from selling 3 reindeer and 1 old horse last November, plus a small government subsidy that every remote herding family receives. Every purchase means something else doesn't get bought. You'll also be selling animals on this trip. You've identified 2 reindeer, both older females past their prime breeding years, and possibly one of the younger gelding horses who's proven himself unnecessary to the herd's dynamics. The money from these sales will fund your purchases and, if there's anything left over, go into the emergency fund that every herding family maintains for disasters. A barn fire, a disease outbreak, a human medical emergency that requires evacuation. But here's the challenge that's weighing on you as you make these lists. Jürgen wants to come on this trip, and if he comes, he might not come back. He mentioned it 3 days ago, casually, while you were working together on fence repairs. "I'd like to see Yakutsk this time," he said. "Maybe stay for a while. See what's there." You didn't respond immediately because what do you say? Jürgen is 14, old enough to make some of his own decisions, young enough that those decisions will shape his entire life. If he goes to Yakutsk, he'll be exposed to modern life. Electricity, internet, heated buildings, jobs that don't involve risking frostbite every day. He'll meet other young people who aren't living this isolated, brutal existence. He'll see possibilities. And he might decide he wants those possibilities more than he wants this life. This is the pattern you've seen repeated in families across Yakutia. The young people leave, pursuing education or employment in the cities, and they don't come back. The herding life continues with an aging population, and eventually, there aren't enough young herders to maintain the tradition. Part of you wants Jürgen to stay, to take over the herd eventually, to continue what your grandfather started and what you've maintained. Part of you wants him to leave, to escape to something easier, warmer, safer. These contradictory desires exist simultaneously, and you can't resolve them because both are rooted in love for your son. Sarjalana knows what you're thinking. Married couples develop that kind of intuition after years together. "He should go," she says quietly, not looking up from the list she's writing. "He should see what else exists. Then he can choose." She's right, of course. Making the choice without information isn't really choosing. It's just accepting default. But the thought of Nurgen seeing Yakutsk, seeing heated apartments and movie theaters and restaurants and young people his age who aren't working 18-hour days in sub-zero temperatures. The thought terrifies you because you know how that story usually ends. But you nod. He can come. The days until departure pass in a blur of preparation. The animals need to be left in a condition where Sarjalana can manage them alone for the 5 days you'll be gone. This means stockpiling extra feed within easy reach, pre-cutting ice blocks and moving them closer to the melting areas, and doing any heavy repairs now rather than leaving them for later. You also need to prepare the vehicle, a UAZ-452, a Soviet-era van that's legendarily reliable in cold weather. The vehicle lives in a heated garage. Well, heated meaning there's a small wood stove that you fire up the night before you plan to use the vehicle, bringing the interior temperature up enough that the engine will turn over. You check the oil, the antifreeze, the battery, the tires. Everything needs to be functional because breaking down on the winter road to Yakutsk, in temperatures that are still deadly despite the warming trend, is not survivable unless you're carrying extensive emergency gear. You are carrying extensive emergency gear. Extra fuel, blankets, food, tools, a satellite phone, borrowed from a neighbor, you don't own one yourself, and flares for signaling if rescue becomes necessary. 3 days before departure, something happens that reminds you exactly why you're making this trip. One of the horses, a middle-aged mare named Steady Feet, develops a limp. You examine her carefully and find swelling in the left front leg, just above the hoof. It's warm to the touch, which means infection or inflammation. You apply your remaining antibiotic ointment and give her the last oral antibiotic powder you have. But you know this isn't enough. She needs injectable antibiotics, the kind you can only get in Yakutsk. If this trip wasn't already planned, you'd be making an emergency run. As it is, you're grateful that the timing worked out. Steady Feet's condition is serious but not immediately life-threatening, and she should be stable for the 3 days until you return with proper medicine. This is the reality of isolation. You're your own veterinarian, your own doctor, your own mechanic, your own everything, and when your knowledge or supplies run out, people or animals die unless you can reach help. And help is 200 kilometers away over frozen rivers and terrible roads. Departure day arrives. It's minus 25 degrees Celsius, clear skies, no wind, perfect conditions. You load the vehicle. The 3 animals you're selling are in crates in the back. They'll be uncomfortable but safe for the journey. Your supply list is tucked into your coat pocket. Nurgen is already in the passenger seat, his face showing excitement he's trying to suppress. Sarjalana and Adalina stand in the doorway, wrapped in coats, waving. You start the engine. It turns over on the 3rd try, rumbling to life with a cloud of blue exhaust, and begin the journey. The winter road is exactly as advertised. A packed snow track that follows roughly the summer route but takes shortcuts across frozen lakes and rivers. You drive carefully, never exceeding 40 kilometers per hour, watching for rough ice, pressure ridges, or open water, rare but catastrophic. Other vehicles have passed recently. You can see their tracks in the snow, which is reassuring. It means the route is current, being actively used. The first river crossing is 40 kilometers in. You slow to a crawl, examining the ice. It's thick, you estimate at least a meter, more than enough to support your vehicle, but you never take it for granted. Every year, people die breaking through river ice. You cross in first gear, steady speed, no sudden movements that could crack the ice, and you exhale when you reach the far side. Nurgen is quiet, watching the landscape roll by. It's endless taiga, skeletal larch trees, white snow, occasional glimpses of frozen streams. Beautiful in its severity, hostile in its emptiness. No towns, no houses, no people. Just wilderness. 6 hours into the journey, you stop for a break at an old Soviet-era way station, a small heated shelter maintained for travelers. You fire up the wood stove inside, heat water for tea, and eat the food Sarjalana packed. frozen fish, bread, dried reindeer meat. What do you think you'll do in Yakutsk? You ask Nurgen. The question has been sitting between you for the entire drive. He's quiet for a moment. I don't know, he finally says. Just look around. See things. You nod. Fair enough. You were 14 once, and you remember the pull of the unknown, the desire to see what existed beyond the narrow boundaries of your familiar world. You never acted on it. Circumstances kept you here, but you remember the feeling. Whatever you decide, you say carefully, it's yours to decide, not mine. He looks at you, surprised. Then he nods, and something in his expression relaxes. For hours later, just as the sun is setting, you crest a hill and see it. Yakutsk. From this distance, it's a cluster of lights against the darkening sky, a concentration of human presence that seems almost impossible after months of isolation. Smoke rises from countless chimneys. You can see apartment buildings, actual multi-story structures, not single-family log houses. Street lights, cars moving on paved roads. Nurgen leans forward, staring. You don't say anything. You just drive toward those lights, toward civilization, toward the place where you'll sell your animals and buy your supplies and possibly lose your son to the gravity of modern life. This is why people stay in Yakutia, despite everything. Because this is home, because the animals depend on you, because the life, as brutal as it is, has meaning and purpose and connection to something larger than individual comfort. But it's also why people leave, because there are other kinds of meaning, other kinds of purpose, and warmth matters. You navigate the city streets, overwhelming after months of emptiness, and find the livestock market. The animals are sold quickly. The prices are fair. You have money now, money to buy supplies, money to address steady feet's infection, money to keep going for another year. Tomorrow, you'll make your purchases. Tonight, you've rented a room in a basic hotel, heated with running water, with electric lights. Luxuries that seem almost decadent. Nurgen is at the window watching the city, saying nothing. You watch him watching, and you wonder what you'll bring back to Yakutia in 5 days. Supplies and medicine, certainly, but also possibly a son who's seen enough of the world to know he doesn't want to spend his life fighting minus 60 degrees Celsius temperatures and wolves in isolation. Or possibly a son who's seen the world and chosen, with full knowledge, to return anyway, because some people are built for the extreme edges of human habitation, and maybe Nurgen is one of them. You'll find out soon enough. For now, you sit in warmth, in light, in the strange comfort of a heated room, and you think about the animals waiting back home, and Sargelana managing alone, and Steady Feet's leg, and the filly who's growing strong, and the endless cycle of work and survival that defines your existence. This is livestock farming in Yakutia. This is life at minus 60 degrees Celsius. This is surviving at the edge of what's possible. And somehow, against all reason, people keep doing it. Year after year, generation after generation, maintaining herds and families and traditions in a place that shouldn't be habitable. Why? Because we're human, and humans are stubborn, and we refuse to let physics and cold and isolation dictate where we can or cannot live. Because the alternative, giving up, leaving, abandoning this place, feels like defeat. And because on clear winter nights, when the stars are brilliant and the aurora dances across the sky and your animals are safe in the barn and your family is gathered around the fire, there's a fierce beauty to this life that makes all the suffering worthwhile. You don't say this to Nurgen. You don't need to. If he's going to understand it, he'll understand it on his own. You turn out the electric light, such a simple thing, such a miracle, and try to sleep in the unfamiliar warmth. The days are getting longer now, and warmer, and back home the snow will be starting to melt around the edges of buildings. Soon it'll be summer, brief, intense, almost tropical by Yakutian standards, when temperatures might reach 20 degrees Celsius or even 25 degrees Celsius. The animals will graze on fresh grass. You'll repair everything that broke during winter, and you'll prepare for the next cold season, because there's always a next cold season. The cycle never ends, but neither does the determination to continue it. You'll make it through another year and another and another, for as long as your body holds out and your will remains unbroken. This is your life. This is your choice. This is surviving at minus 71 degrees Celsius in Yakutia, caring for livestock in ice-covered fields. maintaining an impossible existence against all common sense. And somehow, impossibly, it works. You close your eyes, feeling the warmth of the heated room, thinking about the cold waiting back home, and you absolutely know that in 5 days you'll return to it willingly. Because this is who you are. This is what you do. And nothing, not even minus 71 degrees Celsius, will change that. Sleep well, friend. Tomorrow brings new challenges, new decisions, new opportunities to prove once again that humans can survive anywhere, endure anything, if the will is strong enough and the purpose clear enough. The livestock wait, the land endures, and so do you. Sweet dreams from the coldest inhabited place on Earth.